Pepperdine Law Review. On behalf of our entire staff, I want to welcome each of you to our event and express the Law Review's deep excitement to be sponsoring today's important conversation. Events like this are integral to the life of legal publications like ours. Academic discourse spurs development and change, and just as importantly, it provides an opportunity for law students, the lawyers and lawmakers of tomorrow, to understand how the legal principles that they learn in the classroom actually apply to real-world industries and real-world situations. And the students of the Pepperdine Law Review are committed to that understanding. They are leaders and entrepreneurs, deep thinkers, and problem solvers. By any measure, the Pepperdine Law Review success is mirroring the trajectory of the success of the Pepperdine School of Law itself. We are rapidly gaining in recognition and prestige, and that growth is due in large part to our concerted effort to engage in conversations like this on a regular basis. Today's conversation will involve numerous distinguished panelists and speakers, and will extend into the future in the form of the Pepperdine Law Review's Volume 41 Symposium issue, which will be published next year. And of course, such conversations are ultimately made possible by the attendance of all of you, so thank you again. On that note, I'd like to welcome our first important conversationalist, whose remarks will really kick off today's event, the Dean of the Pepperdine School of Law, Deanell Tacha.
Thank you, Margot. And as a very beginning step, would you thank the Law Review for putting on this remarkable symposium? I am so proud of so many things about this law school and this university, but at the top of the list are these fine students who will go out into a world where one is questioning whether a legal education is worth it. I say to you, what would we do without the lawyers? In every topic, no matter what it is, society needs those people who model civil discourse, who understand the ethical dimensions, who understand that we are not adversaries, we are advocates. We are the kind of people who bring to the public square the notion that we look at the germane issues, bring to bear all the facts, and help society move forward to a new place. Perhaps there's no place that's more important than in the arena of sports, for we are all transfixed by the athletes that we watch. Men and women alike, and perhaps this Final Four weekend is a really appropriate time to be doing this. Men and women alike whose physical abilities and intellectual acuity make us soar beyond what our bodies normally can do. But they need also to have those people who will lift their ethical spirits, understand that we do this within the construct of the rule of law, and understand that athletics in the finest sense of the Olympic ideal must be a reflection of the higher ideals of mankind. So it is in that spirit that last year, as we began to think about this year's Law Review Symposium, I am sort of a child of the old Big Eight, which dates me, and began to watch the imploding that went on among conferences and even between schools and within schools. And I began to think about the legal and ethical dimensions of everything that was happening in sport. And without naming anything, the last year has proved me right. It was time for us to convene a group like this, that real experts on the legal and ethical dimensions of sports law. We at Pepperdine are committed to training lawyers who can work in the sports and entertainment and media industry, for where are we but Southern California. But we want to train the kind of lawyers that Pepperdine is committed to training. Those who understand the broad dimensions of everything they do as lawyers. So I thank all of our speakers. It is a blockbuster lineup. And they are all the kind of lawyers that model these ideals to which I have referred. So I thank every single one of you. I thank the Law Review. And I am so happy this will be published under the Pepperdine masthead. For though we don't have a football team, we do have an ethical training of lawyers. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Dean Tacha. At this time, I'd like to introduce the moderator of our first panel, ESPN legal analyst, and one of my personal favorite Pepperdine Law professors, Margot Cossack.
Good morning. That is praise indeed. This young woman who was in my class last year, I think got the top grade in the class, I'm embarrassed. And you can see why. She's an incredible model. President Starr, glad you're here. Good to be here. Thank you. All right. I think you know everyone, Dave Roberts, the compliance officer from USC. President Starr, dean of this law school, and now the president of Baylor University. President Starr. Steve Potts, who's the compliance officer for Pepperdine. Well, now I got to give some full disclosure here. Probably at some time this morning, we're going to be talking about the 500-pound gorilla in the room, which is money and athletics. So with that in mind, I want to disclose to you that I work for ESPN, speaking of the 500-pound gorilla in the room. And second of all, I want to disclose to you that it was President Starr, then Dean Starr, who hired me to be a member of the faculty here at Pepperdine Law School. So if it looks like I'm taking it easy on him, I am. So that's my full disclosure, at least for this morning. You know, college athletics is I was talking to two young men earlier this morning, is probably the last, or one of the last pure things that we have left. College athletics in America are unlike college athletics or any kinds of amateur athletics, if you will, any place else in the world. You get to root with great joy and passion for your team. You get to root against the other team. It's not like war. Nobody gets hurt. It's not like imperialism. It's not like fouling the air. It's just pure joy. And even if your team doesn't win, and I'm a UCLA Bruin, and my team unfortunately plays his team, and most of the time doesn't win, it's okay because there's always wait till next year. So it's the last, I see it as sort of our last, one of our last pure expressions of joy. Well, it's being tampered with, and we're all concerned about it. Money has raised its head. Colleges, universities need money. Money is out there. We have seen recently old rivalries torn up, geographical rivalries that have lasted for years, ripped apart. Leagues that were conferences that we thought about and depended upon, as the dean has pointed out, no longer exist, and it's happening day after day. The headlines are filled just this week with horrible events that seem to have happened in universities and administrators making questionable decisions. The pressure to win is enormous. So what I want to do this morning is have these gentlemen who are intimately familiar with all of the things that I'm talking about, and come to it from different viewpoints. I want them to discuss those kinds of issues that we're talking about. In some ways, how do we say what I've described, the joy of rooting for college athletics, the joy of rooting for your team, or is it beyond saving? Do we now have to view college athletics in a different way? As I told you, I'm a Bruin, and this year we had at UCLA, we had a young man who played, came in, he was the best recruit in the country, came in, and we watched him, and we had a sense that what we did was kind of rent him for a semester, that he really didn't have much to do with UCLA, that he was just passing through on his way to the pros. It's hard, and this is not an unusual situation. This is what's happening in college basketball. It's hard to root for those. If I'm going to do rooting for that guy, I have to rethink how we do that. That's what's happening in college athletics. So, to start, this panel is called The View from the Top. And President Starr, you're the president of the university, so we're going to start with you. If I ask you this question, how do you see the future of college athletics? And I give you these four choices. A, the future is so bright you have to put on sunglasses. B, the future I view with concern. C, head for the lifeboats. Head for the lifeboats. And D, All of the above. Good stuff. D. Okay, now you got to tell us all.
I think the future, Roger, let me begin by saying thank you to the Dean and to the Pepperdine Law Review for the symposium. It's just a brilliant idea. Wish I had it myself, so congratulations on very creative thinking and now for the implementation of the warm hospitality of this great community, which I still consider a second home. We treasure our friendships here. So with that, I think the future is very bright for most of college athletics. We do rightly focus on these very high visibility problem areas, but you've asked me to speak from the perspective of a servant leader of a Division I program. We have 600 student athletes, and almost all of them graduate. But Sports Illustrated and ESPN do not cover their activity. And the character formation that I see underway is just magnificent. It's just wonderful. All those marvelous qualities of character building that sports generally provide, and especially team sports. And it is remarkable to me how many Baylor alumni were very committed student athletes, never making any headlines, but playing their role, although it may be on the team. The second thing I want to say in terms of the brightness of college athletics, an epiphany came to me very early on in my service at Baylor when this tennis coach asked me to come over and meet with the team. And so I did at the end of practice, watched them practice, and then we headed in. And I was nothing of a speech, it was just, what's on your mind and so forth. And it was not a gripe session at all. In fact, what it turned out to be was person after person expressed gratitude to America, to American higher education. You see, the majority of members of the men's tennis team were internationals. And what I heard from folks from Latin America, what I heard from folks from Europe, both Western Europe and Eastern Europe, tennis is a very international sport, a very global sport, was in my own country, I would have had to have made a choice. Do I want education, higher education, or do I want to play tennis? That's magnificent. We provide that kind of opportunity. Title IX has opened the door in a very powerful way to let's really think about equal opportunities for women. And so what has happened at my institution is that equestrian, we didn't have equestrian, but it's a women's sport at Baylor. 85 student athletes. And when I meet with those student athletes, they're from all over the country. They're united by a great love of horses, obviously, and riding. But then you look at the GPAs, and so sport after sport after sport. These are student athletes. So I don't in any way laugh or mock at the idea and the vision and the goal, and I think the responsibility of college administrators, really beginning with coaches, but then the athletic director and then the central administration and ultimately the Board of Regents is to really try to foster the ideal of the student athlete. And therefore, the one at Dawn is utterly inimical to that, and yet, as we know, that was reformed because of LeBron. And they started playing for the LA Lakers, who just go directly to the pros. So I said, well, that's not good. Out of high school. So that's not good, so let's at least have them touch base in college. But I wish we could move, if we're talking about now the darker side, it would be a complete reform so that, this is, I'm not suggesting this is realistic, it is idealistic, that everyone does in fact play out his or her eligibility, and this goes for baseball, before being eligible for the draft. I think America would be better as a result of that. It would be a true restoration of the student athlete.
Britt, who is the Conference chairman, perhaps didn't say that when I introduced him, but your response to that. And particularly, I like what President Starr said about the notion of requiring students to play out their eligibility. And the answer to the question about how's it look out there, bright or not so bright?
Well, I think we have disconnect at the high end in the system. You know, my view of college athletics, I've been working at for about 20 or 25 years, is that for the most part, it's very healthy, and the values of the university are reflected in the values of their athletics programs, and the student athletes are students first, and the contribution is made to higher education and to the universities. Of course, at the high end, I think we have major challenges right now. I think in many ways it's the best of times and the worst of times. We've got economic growth from media agreements and other sources of revenue that are extreme. We just saw a new contract done for the college football playoff that represented 400% increase in already a very lucrative set of agreements. And so you have universities that have seen budgets grow from the last, since I've been around, I've seen the University of Texas's budget grow from less than 20 million to 180 million. And if you project those growth lines out, you know, at some point, you know that something has to give on that side. And so I see great economic growth and great, opportunity for prosperity. On the other hand, you have higher ed, I think, that doesn't have an ability to deal with it. The challenge is for higher ed to try to incorporate that kind of economic machine into its fabric is extreme. You have faculty that don't get raises for years and years, and the amount of coaches that in one of the country's worst economic times see double-digit salary growth across the board. And so the optics of that obviously are challenging. The conference realignment piece, I think that Deanell Tacha talked about is challenging for all of us because it changes some of the traditions and the rivalries and our expectations for college athletics and how we view them. I do think the academic reform has been very successful. I think that the steps that the leadership has taken to get student athletes on track to graduate, and then the performance metric on the back end to reward graduation has been helpful. I think it leads to other things, unfortunately, at the high end. It leads to admissions decisions that might not be altogether right for the highest student athletes and prospective student athletes. I think we see instances of universities channeling athletes into particular academic programs because they need to do that in order to make sure that they stay on track to graduate. So I think in many ways it is the best of times and the worst of times. I wear sunglasses from time to time, Roger, so I appreciate that. I'm concerned almost all the time about the future of athletics. I don't think I'm ready to head for the lifeboats yet, but I will tell you that there's some major issues that we have to deal with, and I'm glad we have folks here like Starr who can, understands it, because ultimately we need leadership to be able to find these issues and move us forward. Unfortunately, what I'm beginning to see is, I think, a lack of confidence in national structures in terms of our ability to get our arms around it. We need national structures to be able to define these things that we need. And unfortunately, not only I think do we have a public lack of confidence sometimes in our national structures, but also within our own membership. So that's kind of a rambling response.
It's a good response. Thank you. Dave, SC, you are a compliance German, and at any major university that is a tough job, particularly one as successful as you guys have been. Most of the time people want to see all that team, but nevertheless, answering that same question, are you wearing sunglasses or are you hitting the light?
Well, last night you told me there was another choice, it was take your aspirin and call you in the morning.
I thought maybe that was a little tough.
No, that's usually what I do. No, it'll be a little bit of a rambling response as well. I mean, I think for the overwhelming majority of student athletes, not only our program, but probably across the country, it is very, it works very well. It's in the high end, high-profile sports. The markets where the dollar is really floating around, that there are problematic issues. So I think there's quite 3 or 4 areas that need work and need emphasis. The academic piece is important. The rules are being changed to make the initial eligibility and continuing eligibility standards tougher, which is going to help. It's going to improve the quality of the people coming in. However, the piece that's left on the table is that going to leave some people out who won't have opportunity. I've seen data suggesting that when these new initial eligibility forms go, I believe, effect in 2016, approximately 30–40% of the athletes in, for example, PCS football, basketball teams, major universities, they wouldn't be in the institutions. So that's something we have to wrestle with. Is that where we want to go, as opposed to more effort to make sure they get through. The dollar piece of it is tough too. You see all these very large television contracts coming into place, a lot more revenue coming to the schools, which is, you think that's a very good thing. But what that also does is have our athletes go on the road more, so that they're more on TV. We have student athletes now that would only miss X days of classes, and now they're missing more because they're on the road more. So that's an academic piece we have to deal with. We have to look at. Professional sports, the one and done rule. I mean, we're going to need some help from the professional leagues as well. This can't be done by the institutions alone. So with a huge demand to get this talent out of the universities and on the court or on the field, it's difficult. And so whether you're talking about an agent issue or the junior rule at the NFL or these other issues, there has to be a good working relationship between the pros and the colleges too. So lastly, you've got a lot of lawsuits out there. The Banner lawsuit, for example, is going to have a huge issue if he is successful. These TV contracts are not going to look as pleasant as they once did. So a lot of moving pieces. I agree for the most part. It's very bright. It's a great thing in sports and in colleges, but it does need some protection. We got to make sure there is a reconciliation between the haves and the have-not, the formula that is now and the NC2A. Sometimes the puck will go ahead full speed, and then there's a big debate between schools that have the resources to implement some of these reforms, and schools that don't. So those are a lot of problems, but again, I think it's a bright view for most.
Steve, you're here at Pepperdine with us, and perhaps you don't face some of the same pressures that these gentlemen do. We don't have a football team, but we have a strong athletic program. You wearing sunglasses, or you getting in that photo?
Well, let me start by saying thanks for the opportunity to be back in this room. 34 years ago, I sat in this room as the first year law student, and it still makes me a little nervous.
There's no test today.
That's nice. I do come at this, I think, a little differently. I agree with everything that's been said from my colleagues here. There are challenges globally and certainly, but I deal every day with more of a local view and looking at it from that perspective. There are certainly times when it is so bright that you need 2 or 3 pairs of sunglasses. I think about in what we do. I think about the times where we're just so excited about the accomplishments of our student athletes, both on the field and in the classroom and in the community. And those are the kinds of things that make me feel that we're really doing something great here. That's important. Athletics, you have to view athletics, I believe, as part of the educational enterprise. It has to be, it can't be separate and apart from what the university is trying to do with each and every student on this campus. We talk about on this campus, preparing our students for lives of service, purpose, and leadership, and athletics is part of that mission. And so I think when we see that working out in the lives of our student athletes, those are the kinds of things that make us, that really get us excited and really view the future of what we do. It's very bright. I think about, last spring I was with our baseball team up at Stanford, and we're playing in a regional tournament there, and it's 5-4 in the 9th inning, and we're behind, and one of our walk-on seniors is at the plate, and he hits a grand slam, and we go on to beat Fresno State. And I'll never forget that moment. And the life of that young man, I was with his grandfather just yesterday, and he was recanting the story play by play with tears in his eyes. And those are the kinds of things that really motivate me. I can recall last spring being with our men's tennis team at the University of Georgia playing in the national championship in the semifinals. There are about 10 Pepperdine supporters there and about 5,000 Georgia Bulldog supporters there, and we lead them. And those are the kinds of things that really make you appreciate what college athletics is all about. Now, that doesn't mean everything is that way all the time. There's concern, globally and locally. I think about concern, when our budgets, our expense budgets go up 1% every year, and airline tickets just went up $10, and we buy about 200 airline tickets every year, and if they go up $10, that's another $20,000 that we have budgeted for. And so, yeah, there's some concern there, how we're going to do that, and making sure our athletes are traveling safely and not having to bus everywhere so they miss more class. But yet the challenge is how do we fund it? And then I think about, there are certain times when the thought quickly crosses your mind, where are the lifeboats? I can recall sitting in the office of our dean of enrollment here on campus and asking him to explain to me, tell me again, how do we award need-based aid here? And after he went through it about the third time, and my stomach got bigger and bigger because I knew we had an NCAA problem. Quickly the thought is, well, where is that lifeboat? Well, you work through it. I think, the answer is D, of course. I agree with my colleagues here. And sometimes you experience all those things, before noon. But that's what we do, and that's part of it that I love. All the issues that were mentioned, yeah, those are big issues. We're fortunate, I guess in a way. I love college football. I love it, and I enjoy every minute of it. But not having to deal with those kinds of issues is the difference. There are about 110, I guess, of us Division I members that don't play football, and it does, however, create some challenges when rules are made and regulations are passed that are really done to address football needs and football issues, and yet we're thrown in there as well. I really consider it a privilege to be able to do what I do here.
Let me just follow up just briefly. You brought up a point that I was going to make. The anticipation, the point that you anticipated was our program here at Pepperdine doesn't have a football program, and therefore my question to you was, do you think that your job, that you don't have as much pressure on you to win, to raise revenue? Our sports are volleyball, we do great in, we do great in tennis, okay in basketball, we do pretty good in basketball, but we're not out there in the major market, nor are we dependent upon television to make us. Do you think that takes away, you in some ways makes your job simpler?
No. No. When you're in this profession and you deal with competitive people, and you want to deal with competitive people, then the pressure is there. Perhaps, we don't have a $180 million budget like the University of Texas. Ours is about $14 million. But the need to compete and the need to have success in those things where we do compete is still there. We're a program of there are 14 Division I schools that have won 9 national championships in 5 different men's sports. 14. We're one of 14, and by far the smallest. We're sitting here with an undergraduate school of about 3,000, and we've won 9 NCAA Division I national championships, beating plenty of the BCS programs in sports other than football, of course. And so, because of that, and because of our to do as well as we can in anything that we do here. It's one of the things I love about Pepperdine. Whatever we choose to do, we're going to do it to the best of our ability. It's a different pressure, no doubt. My job is different than Pat Haynes at USC. My job is different than Dan Brewer at UCLA, no doubt. But there's still, it still has its own pressures.
I should have added baseball to that. It's a great baseball team, great baseball team. President Starr, the pressure to win. Do you ever feel that you are leveraging the need to win in athletics as against the improving of the academic side of the university?
I think there is, ironically, a tension, interesting enough. And I do want to mention one thing, almost as a footnote to what's been said, and that is how robust is what we call academic support program. I think that is something that every institution has to really focus on. Because when I look at what large programs are doing in terms of academic support, I'm impressed. You talk about student athletes traveling, it is true. But then look, in these programs, is there an academic support officer there who is assisting with integrity? I realize anything, if there's not integrity, it's all over. And I think that's something to bear in mind, especially distance learning and so forth. So I'm not underestimating the burdens on the student athletes. But I do think it would be helpful for us to focus on what universities do in terms of the academic support, including one of the things that I've noticed, which is very robust testing early on and identifying some issues of learning disabilities in student athletes. Because they may have been superb on whatever the field was or in the gymnasium, and that was their great talent. But perhaps in their earlier years, in their pre-college years, some learning issues weren't identified. I can start naming names and think where there's been wonderful remediation by virtue of what the athletics program does. The other thing that I'm sure we'll talk about, but there needs to be, this all is according to what I would call the value of balance. And I want to quote from Mark Emmer with respect to balance, in connection with Penn State. And the other dimension is, what is your compliance office? So we've got a great compliance officer here. And how robust is that and transparent? We'll, I'm sure, be talking about compliance specifically. Because therein lies much of the problem. I think we can handle the money, but we really can't. We can handle the money issues as long as we remember the value of student athletes. I think that is a handleable issue. But have we somehow, in certain areas, gone off the tracks with respect to the moral need for balance? So let me quote from Mark Emmer. In announcing the sanctions, and they were very, very severe sanctions on Penn State, Mark Emmer said this: if you find yourself in a position where the athletic culture is taking precedence over the academic culture, then a variety of bad things can occur. I think a way of thinking about college athletics, whether we need to head for the lifeboats or just put on some sunglasses and sunscreen and so forth, I'm much more optimistic than some of the doom and gloom voices around, is the athletic culture and the academic culture, and how can we ensure that they're complementing one another. And that is also responsibility of someone we haven't talked about yet, and that's the coaches, the entire coaching staff, beginning obviously with the head coaches of all the programs. And so it's as if there are two worlds or silos. There's the athletic world and there is the academic world. And the more that we can connect those two worlds, not segregating the student athletes so that they live off in their own world and just interact with their own folks. We love it when Brittany Weiner, not headed for the Final Four, but our Lady Bears iconic person, is longboarding around campus with non-student athletes, because she longboards with non-student athletes. Those are her buds. So she is not just hanging out with her fellow Lady Bears basketball players. She hangs out with young men and young women who love to longboard. That's the way they scoot around. And I just think it's great. And I think it's great too, that she really interacts, and they don't live a segregated life. I think that is really problematic. And whenever I hear that this university program, and you know some of the universities, some of it's now building another Taj Mahal dorm just for the student athletes, then I think you creating this ghettoized approach that is really losing, or has the danger, I believe, of losing or compromising the balance that should exist between the academic culture and the athletic culture.
Right, athletics and academics. Today, we think of athletics at the university and we think of money. Athletics, I suppose, brings in, although some of the research is unclear, but it's clear it brings in a lot of money. Doesn't it put a great pressure on coaches to win? Doesn't it put pressure on visibility? And doesn't that pressure then filter on down to where we see the kinds of problems that we just see? And for example, Penn State or others.
Well, I think again, at the high end it does, but I think, the rest of intercollegiate athletics, we need to make sure we don't just put it all in one bucket, because there are challenges at the high end that are unique challenges that universities are trying to deal with. But as a whole, I can come back to, I think athletics is in a very healthy place. College athletics, I think, makes a great contribution to the university. I think, of course, there's tension, as President Starr said, because if you win, you're able to get accolade. You're able to have great success. You have more prosperity if you win. So of course there's economic pressure and tension to win that puts administrators and coaches in a little bit of a friction zone as they make decisions. They have to make decisions every day that affect whether that student plays or that student doesn't play. Whether we recruit this student or we don't recruit this student. If we recruit this student, he comes, there's a better chance we'll win. How we recruit this student. Because other universities are recruiting that student in a certain way. So there is a lot of tension that's inherent, and it's probably been in existence at this high end for a long, long time. But I do agree with what President Starr said. I think it's a function of us being able to maintain the balance and us being able to ensure that student athletes are integrated into the student population. And we operate, obviously, with integrity. All that, but I think it can work. But the tension seems to be ever present, and also, I think, it tends to be increasing tension as the commercial influence grows.
Dave, increasing influence, increasing tension as commercial influence grows. Certainly USC is very few places, institutions that are known for athletics, as well as one university, more than USC. We used to play 8 games years ago in football, then 10 games, now 12, and now sometimes we see them playing 14. That's done for television. How do you resist? What do you do? On one hand, they talk about, your colleagues have talked about the balance. The balance, I think, perception is reality, and the balance seems to be, I think, to most people, tipping in favor of commercialism. Am I right or wrong?
Well, I'd be hard-pressed to argue with you on that. In other words, you can just look at the television contracts that were put in place by the northern conferences, trying to contribute to Texas its TV revenues. The big programs get a huge amount of their money from television revenues. I think that is the direction of the new commissioner, and that's one of the main focus points that you have. So I think that's true. Along with the TV contract, there are a lot of other professionals, sponsors, whether it be Nike, whether it be whomever it is. There's a lot of money out there that wants to have influence in professional sports. The whole issue of logos and monograms on uniforms, something that's regulated in terms of the size of the movie. I remember when Michael was playing in the Masters a few years ago, and that ball rolled in the hole on 16, and Nike logo right there. So, commercialism is huge, and the money's a huge issue. It drives the agents who want to go out and get young players to either go directly from high school to college in those sports they allow, or they're feeding on college campuses to make sure they very hard to deal with. The way we look at it is a shared responsibility. I mean, what we need to do in our school, we have a very large compliance office of outstanding compliance people, but with the size of that program and the pressure, we need head coaches to be involved. And some ways put legislation in place to meet the size of their reports. We need to have student academic services. Judge Starr mentioned it's got to be a huge part of that when you bring in some of the very high-profile athletes that need some special help and assessment. So that's a part of it too. And lastly, there's an issue I think that needs to be addressed in the high-end program, and that's this concept of entitlement that the young athletes come into. They've kind of been favored and treated in a special way their entire lives. So those are all issues that have to be addressed, and we call it shared responsibility. It's not just the compliance office, it's the sport administrators, it's the head coach, it's the issues, it's the sales. So all these people are kind of bulwarks against it all, just controlling it.
We need a follow-up question. From your point of view, as compliance officer of police trustees at USC, what you just said makes absolute sense. But you have coaches at all major universities who I would suspect are making quite a bit more money than you. And me. I want to get us right. What I'm trying to set up is the tension that exists between them and what they feel they need to do, and you as maybe the top cop, if you will. Is there a tension there? They feel this pressure, well, Dave, I understand what Dave's saying, and he's right, and these are the rules, but if I don't get player X in here, my $2 million contract is out the door. Well, how do you deal with that?
Well, it's not just getting the player X in the door, it's getting the player X in the door and winning balls.
Winning balls.
Because that's the ultimate test, because you see it across the country. I mean, people are getting their teams, Tony Smith, pretty good record, and now he's out on his year. So winning is a huge pressure. And the big high-powered programs, they count the fact, we're going to win national championships. Well, you're not winning national championships, you may not be coaching that institution for a long period of time. So what do? What we do, what my staff does very well is, we basically try to get them to understand that we're helping. Because if they don't follow the rules, the new head coach responsibility will switch out to this. The first 3 games, you may get athlete actually majority of the coaching for the next 3 games, first 3 games of the season. We're trying to get this in the middle. You'll come and talk to us about these issues. I may not get you all the way home. I'll get 90% of the way. Or if we have a small problem we cure it right now, maybe that kid misses 1 game, 2 games. Back to tax season. So it's a long negotiation where it's trying to make them understand that the historical way athletics has always operated. When I played football in the late 60s or 70s, I didn't even know what it is. But now those rules are so big, so ominous, and so many of them that you've got to convince the coaches that they don't do it right. I talked about this morning, there are no problems. Right. Whether it's bad conduct on the court, whether it's giving a benefit to get a recruit in the door, or the improper phone call, it's going to come out. So you're going to see that. So what we do is convince those coaches we're helping them save themselves, so they can still be on the field with their teams and compete at high level. Does it always work? No. But that's our mission. I hate to say it. I'm trying to convert them. I'm trying to get them to see the light. And in this day and age, it's a hard thing to do with our pressures, but that's our motto is talk to us first and fix it.
Steve, we don't, as we've indicated, you don't have, the football team, perhaps you don't have that same kind of pressure to win that the football teams bring. But we at Pepperdine also experienced a certain run-in with commercialism, a certain run. We just sponsored, or were the sponsor for the NC2A finals or semifinals, quarterfinals that were held here in Los Angeles. I noticed our big Pepperdine banner all over, and I was proud to see it. Isn't that in a way trying to improve our brand? Isn't that what that was aimed at?
Well, of course, yeah. Exposure for your program and your athletic program brings exposure for the university. And again, it has to be that, as Dave said, that shared responsibility and that shared enterprise. That if you don't view if we in athletics don't view our role in helping to broaden the brand and exposure of our university, then we're not doing what we're supposed to do. We're here. We're here on this ground to teach young men and women. And again, I come back to what they said. Again, if you view athletics as being separate and apart from what's going on here on campus, then I think that's where a lot of the trouble starts. When you don't have that connection, between the faculty and the athletic academic support and the compliance folks, then you're going to get in trouble. If you don't have that connection with the community on campus, that's when it's going to start having problems. When you lose sight of the fact that at the end of the day, we're here to train these young men and women and prepare them for the rest of their lives in various ways, whether it be through academics, or whether it be through athletics, or whether it be through a blending of that. Then if we lose sight of that, then yeah, we're going to have issues. Now, the branding and the commercialism is there because we need money. We need money. We have the resources. Again, our $14 million budget isn't going to go very far when we're competing with these guys. And we do compete with these guys. And so we have to find other ways to identify sources of revenue that will help us build our program. And so, it's there and the pressures are there. Maybe they're not seen as much as they are at some of the BCS schools, but it's there.
President Starr, you mentioned the balance. Let me give you a statistic that recently came out by a study by the American Institutes of Research. The American Institutes of Research said that almost 7 times more money are spent by universities on athletes than on ordinary students. Doesn't that, would you say that de-emphasizes the mission of the university, which is to research and to teach, and puts the emphasis on athletics?
Well, at one level, it's very troubling. It just doesn't seem right. But at another level, when one looks at the entirety of the dynamic, what one sees is that an athletic program brings people together in community. You can have a concert, you can have a learned lecture, and have a Nobel laureate come in, you'll have 500 to 600 people, and they'll be very grateful and edified by it. But what athletics does is it brings people together in community, and it builds enthusiasm, and has a generative capacity, which I came to understand long before I was called to leadership at Baylor. And very briefly told, Alan Merton's very distinguished, now former president of George Mason, who's a very renowned economist, served on the Council of Economic Advisors and all that. He's not a sports guy. But he said, I learned my lesson when the George Mason men's basketball team made it to the Final Four some few years ago. Boatloads of money started flowing in from alums and friends, neighbors that they had never heard of, never connected with. He said, I learned my lesson. That athletics gives you not just the front porch, as is often said, but it gives you, here it is, this is our introduction to George Mason University or Pepperdine University, whatever the university is. And there's no substitute for that, of bringing the alumni together. So I could elaborate on the point, but I'm not as troubled as you might think that yet to put that product out there is going to be very, very costly. So I love what Steve said, and you look for other sources through integrity of revenue. And I think that's a very good thing, because this part of it is a business. What is our return on investment? But I do think that the return on investment of a successful athletics program with integrity is incalculably high. You're not going to be able to put that much quantified, but you can tell the spirit, the enthusiasm, things are good, things are healthy, that this is great, but again, it brings people into the community, and it may result, and this is again what Alan Mertens was saying, it wasn't just that people were donating to Basketball Coaches Excellence Fund, they were given to the economics department. It was a catalytic event to say, I need to be giving back to alma mater or my son or daughter's school and so forth. And if we could find a way to start measuring that, I think it would help provide a greater sense of more balance there than you might expect. It's not irrational conduct to invest in a program that creates uniquely this enthusiasm and love for the university.
All right, I'm sorry. Go ahead. This is the first time I've ever raised my hand in this room.
Not unlike my students.
But I mean, you hit a nerve. You just hit a nerve with me, and I know you didn't intend to. But I think and I agree with everything that Starr said. It just always gets me when people talk about, we're spending 7 times more on student athletes than we do on the regular students. But they never talk about, what are we asking them? What are we asking them to do? We're asking them to get up at 6:30 in the morning and go go through their strength and conditioning, and then hurry back and maybe get a shower and grab something for breakfast, and they got to get to class at 8 o'clock. And then they got to sit through 4 or 5 hours of class, and then they got to be back on the field or the court for 2.5, 3 hours in the afternoon, and then at 6 o'clock, all of a sudden now they got to, hopefully they're going to start preparing for class tomorrow and doing all that, and their day is gone. We ask almost every bit of their day from them, and I think we ask too much of their day from them. We ask them to get on a bus and drive for 5 hours to San Francisco to play a game, and maybe get back on the bus and get back at 3 o'clock in the morning and get up and go to class at 8 o'clock. We expect that of them. The sacrifices that those young men and women make in order, and they do it willingly in a lot of cases. In most cases, they do it willingly, and some with very little athletic aid or no athletic aid, simply because they love their sport. And so they do that. And yeah, we're gonna spend more money on them. We're gonna feed them when we're traveling. We're gonna hopefully travel them in a way that's safe and convenient, as convenient as possible. If they get hurt, we're gonna try to heal them as quickly as we can. All those things, I can see. I'm surprised it's not more than 7 times in a lot of cases. It sounds like, we're favoring student athletes. But boy, I tell you, when you look at what they do for us, when you look at the sacrifices they make. Here on this campus, we encourage students to participate in international programs. We have probably the best international experiences any student in this country can have. You can go abroad in 5 or 6 different places and spend a year, spend a semester. Our student athletes can't. They can't do that. We're trying to create a summer program that they can have that kind of experience, but a lot of them will leave here and not have access to the kind of experiences that other Pepperdine students have access to. So, I just think too often that gets overlooked.
Well, you have brought up an interesting point, and I wasn't going to get to it till later, but you brought it up, and I think I have to ask you about it now. If in fact, I think all you gentlemen would agree that what Steve has said is true, that we ask more of athletes than we ask of other students, and they give us a lot more.
I'm sorry, guys.
Than other students. So let's talk about the O'Bannon case. Because O'Bannon is saying, that's right, I gave you a lot more than the ordinary did. In fact, O'Bannon would agree with you and say, I was up at doing the practice and I was doing exactly what you described. And when I came here as an 18-year-old boy, young man, I with or without knowing what I was doing, I signed an agreement saying that you, the University NC2A, would be able to use my likeness in the future, long after I'm gone from the university, and profit from it. That's one issue. The second issue is, again, agreeing with you that this is what the student athlete does. Let's talk about the issue of payments. We can do it one after another, but I think that you brought up a very interesting point about how hard these young men and women work. There is a great deal of discussion today about that. Let's start first with payment.
Now I see why I didn't raise my hand.
Yeah, you started this.
Yeah, sorry. I was going to let everybody slide on this one, too.
I gotta go to the restroom.
I'm gonna keep it as simple as I can. I'm a pretty simple thinker. I think again, if we're spending 7 times what we spend on normal students here, we are compensating them to some degree for their participation in intercollegiate athletics. I don't think any student athlete should be paid for that participation while they're eligible to compete. I think it's absolutely wrong for any school, for any organization, for any private company to benefit from the name or likeness of that particular individual outside of their participation as a student athlete.
When we refer to it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it makes no sense to me that EA Sports can use their name or likeness without compensating them after they're done competing.
Well, it's not that there's no compensation, it just goes to other people.
Well, no compensation to the individual whose name or likeness they're using. Absolutely. But again, while they're a student athlete, no, I think we're compensating them. Fairly.
Dave, and guys, I'm really not picking on you, this is just out there. What Steve said was that they are compensated using my number 7 times more, but that's the compensation, not actual money in their pocket. An interesting thing happened the other day at the McDonald's High School All-American game. A reporter went in and interviewed these young men who were all top-notch ball players, and they're all going to top-notch universities across the country, and asked them if they thought they should be paid. And by and large, they all thought they should be paid. So if we asked them whether or not they should get paid for playing basketball at a university, at least this year's McDonald's All-American said, this wouldn't be a bad idea, a little extra money too. What about paying athletes? Do you think that this is that we're talking about it today, that's something that's going to happen 5 years from now, never, 10 years from now? Is the handwriting on the wall?
Well, that's not a question. I agree with Steve. There are things I think we should be doing for our athletes that we don't do today. We would call that payment, that it's payment. For example, full cost of attendance and scholarship circumstances. For example, food for our water. There's many calories of some other scholarship purchases. So there's a lot of things that should be done, and if you're going to call those payments, then I think it should be done. And remember now, when you run a full scholarship to someplace like USC over 4 years, that is a pretty substantial amount of money that is being put in their stead to attend classes and to have a stipend. As I said, I thought that stipend should be higher than the full cost of attendance. We've heard a lot of coaches say, well, let's get stupid or screw it. Just put the law on the table and because I want to pay them $100 a year. I don't think we should go there. I think we should make sure these young men have the necessary food and all with it as well, but they need to be in class. But they're getting a great education. And remember too, what we're really talking about is a smaller percentage of the total student and athlete population across the board. Most of these kids are on scholarship. They come to do it because they love it, and they're coming out, and as Mr. Mann says, 99% of them don't compete something under the sport. So, what we're really asking is, in sports where you're really making money, basketball and football, and that's where our band and football players are. And there, I agree. I think when you're at the university, I don't really have a problem with someone putting their name up on the game or what they did, and probably there has to be something done with that company to compense the individual is no longer a student athlete. So I think there probably should be something that transpires out of exactly that. Not in favor of turning college athletes to the pros. If we do that, there's just so many can words that
I was just handed a note that said, remember to remind people the right questions and to pass them to the aisle for our panelists. And I can also call on audience members that have questions, so long as I repeat the question before panelists answer.
Underneath that, in parentheses, you read it.
Can I comment just very briefly? Because it seems to me that the whole issue of the compensation of student athletes raises just a foundational question of what is the model, what is the principle. And as long as we lift up, as I think we have historically done, even with the rise of commercialization of the value of an education, this is a student athlete who is representing, he or she is representing the university in a uniform, in intercollegiate competition, that model, by its very nature, says, of course we're not going to pay. You are, for reasons that have already been said, being compensated. And okay, so let's just look at the economics. If you go ahead and do your job and you get your degree, you will make statistically, over the life of your career, the athletics aside, $1 million more over your lifetime than you would have if you just gotten a high school education. But of course, you may make many more, at least hundreds of thousands of dollars. That is a huge, huge benefit. The second and final thing I would say, Roger, is most athletic programs, as I assume everyone knows, run at a deficit. So we are subsidizing student athletes for them to do that which is now enabling them through a scholarship. But I think we're really talking about programs where the student athletes who are saying, pay me money, are in a money-making sport, in a money-making program, but that's really a handful of schools. How many institutions make money off athletics? Baylor University does not. We have a chronic deficit. So we're deficit spenders, and we believe it is a very wise investment. We get a large return on investment. There's character building, all those things I tried to identify earlier. Now, in terms of the postgraduate, I think that does raise a different set of moral issues. The commercialization of the likeness. Once that student athlete has graduated, I think it's a totally different situation. But the fact that, does anyone know off the top of his or her head how many athletic programs make money? Is it 20?
It's in the low 20s.
It's in the low 20s. So just think of that. So the vast majority of Division I schools are subsidizing in order to give you that opportunity to play football or basketball. So even in a revenue-making sport, but by the way, dear football player, basketball player, do you think that you should not be cross-subsidizing the tennis team, which is not a revenue-generating sport? Hey, most of them would say, oh, no, of course. What about the volleyball team? Yeah, we should do that. But by the way, all that is going to contribute to deficit spending that the university is doing on behalf of the athletics program. You're not making us money, you're losing us money. So if you want to start paying us, thank you. I would gladly accept that, especially when you're a very distinguished alumnus, or alumni.
I'd like to comment on that very briefly as well. I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago, I got asked a question in an interview whether we should pay the players. And I said, if trend lines don't change over the next decade, something will have to give. So I got home that night on the patio and looked, and the TV was on, and there I was, paying for play. And that's absolutely not what I said, but I will tell you, I agree with everything that's been said. I think student athletes are compensated through education. Student athletes have the opportunity going forward. But I do think that the optics for high-end major college athletics are challenging from this regard. I was with the general manager of the Carolina Panthers, and we were talking about this. He's a former AD at TCU, great guy. And I said, well, how do you like working in the NFL as opposed to college? And he said, I never really thought I would like it better in the NFL, but I do, because there's a purity about the NFL. We don't make any bones about what we do. We're going to win games. We're going to put money into it. We're going to prepare, and we're going to do it. The college athletics thing, he said, was full of a lot of conflict. And then we talked about this issue, and he said that 82% of his overhead goes to labor, the players in an NFL league. And then we thought about that for a moment, and we said, okay, now, in the college structure, it's inverted probably entirely. Because if you think about tuition, fees, room, board, books, and the basic educational package for football players and men's basketball players, for example, that's going to be probably 20% of the overall cost. In fact, there's coaches, I think, in the sport of football and basketball, that their own personal compensation on an annual basis is greater than all the players on their entire team. And so that's kind of what I meant. I don't think that we have the discipline in higher education to not spend it. I think we just spend it. And I think we feel compelled to spend because those across the highway or across town are spending. And if we don't do it, our coach is going to go somewhere else. And so the coach's salaries are on us because we have to spend the money on something. So we end up spending the money on coaches' salaries. Obviously, we do a lot of things for student athletes that are great. Travel, training, facilities. We end up redoing locker rooms. About every other year, we redo the locker room because we need to, because they redid their locker room, and for us to be competitive in recruiting, we have to have mahogany and the flat screen in the locker room. Because the money has to go somewhere, because we've got this fixed cost labor. So that's just a little different perspective. I still am not for paying players. I don't think I'll ever be for paying players. But I do think something will have to give if these trend lines continue.
I've heard what I think may be conflicting answers here in the sense of this. Yes, athletics play a great role in our university, and they are the seed which brings in a great deal of money which goes to the benefit of all. We do that because that is one of the reasons that we put so much emphasis on athletics, because our return, while it may not be making a profit in athletics, overall is better for our university. We have, in a sense, professionalized everything but the labor pool. I think that is what you said, the class means better equipment, new stadiums, higher pay for coach. So what's wrong with paying the players? It's just another cost of doing business. It's a cost that many of us who think about colleges as amateur athletics, we don't like. But what's wrong with paying them? If we say that we're paying them by giving them an education, and as President Starr points out, giving them the opportunity over a lifetime to earn a great deal more money, then what's wrong with just, it's another form of compensation, like education.
That's me?
Yes, sir.
I said I wasn't a pay-for-play guy. I think something's fundamentally wrong with that. Fundamentally wrong, because universities are first and foremost about education. Universities have athletics embedded into them, and it was a decision that was made 100 years ago to do it this way. No other structure or system we know of internationally does this, but we decided to park these programs into our universities. And when we did that, we did it with the understanding that we would have amateurism, and we would have that as bedrock to the way the relationship works between athletics and the university. And I think when you elevate that program to an employment model, you change. You have a professional program. That's a part of the university, and I think that's problematic.
I was just going to say, I would also just struggle, and others perhaps would come up with a model of payments. Let's say, okay, let's compensate our players. All right, so we're going to compensate all 600 student athletes. Well, that's kind of odd. Or we're going to compensate exactly the same amount. So the starting quarterback makes the sit. Oh no, we've got to pay the starting quarterback more than the red shirt. The red shirt's not out there, but okay, but the red shirt has to be practicing at 5:30 in the morning or spring training or what have you. The host of questions that would arise. I mean, there's some people in their, let's just stick with football, who in their 4 years of eligibility never start, and that's the majority of young men on the team. You're going to compensate them. Well, how are you going to? So, okay, we'll have base pay, just like the NFL. You get $350,000 because you're a rookie. Okay, no No matter how much you play, how many minutes you're out there, you get 300 results. So is that the system we're going to have? All right. Now, we are losing lots of revenue on your dear tennis team. So how much should we, do you see what I'm saying? It is going to be incredibly complicated to create a system that will be viewed by all concerned as fair and equitable. And that's just a practical issue, quite apart from what I see as the fundamental policy or moral issue. What is this enterprise all about? Yes, there's a lot of money, but for the reasons we've already said, getting education and so forth, and we are treating you like princes and princesses. I love it when I'm eating with one of our teams on the road. I eat a whole lot better. Seriously. I tell you, we were at the NIT, Baylor Bears won the NIT last night. I'm thankful for that, but I know what those young men were having, the whole staff, for dinner afterwards. And I know what they had for breakfast, because I had breakfast with them before the opening game. They are treated royally. So add all that up, Roger, and we do take care of our student athletes. And if we're not taking care of them, then the one thing that I think has not been mentioned is the transparency and the whistleblowing. It's going to come out. If you're mistreating your athletes, I guess we've seen a lot of that happen. You can't turn on ESPN and not see it all over again. So if there's mistreatment or abuse, and then you see how people get into trouble, I realize you may want to go in this direction on another part of our conversation, but it is, if you don't report, you're in trouble. You're in trouble. And just look at the criminal indictments that have been returned in Pennsylvania, including, and this gets a lot of people's attention, the university president. It's not just the university president, it's fired Pennsylvania. He's a very distinguished academic, but he's now under criminal indictment. And what's the allegation? He did not report, he did not act on the information that came to you. What happened to Coach Trust at Ohio State? Was he going over and getting tattoos? No, he wasn't. But he had information, so the allegations, so the reports are, and he did not act on that. And yet, this office, Miami, over and over again, you look at these great issues of scandal. And so this ideal of transparency, and this comes back to the compliance model that Dave can speak to much more authoritatively, but the compliance model is there. Do you have these kinds of models in an NFL professional football? No, you do not. Why do we have all these models? Why do we have all these regulations? It's because these are student athletes, and they're there fundamentally for an education.
Dave, I'm going to ask you one final question on this. The AD of Texas said that if O'Bannon was successful, it would bankrupt college sports, and the University of Texas would end up as a Division III program. That's a big laugh. I'm not going to University of Texas.
I think they'll succeed first.
Yeah. O'Bannon is O'Bannon is the young man who's suing in a class action, saying that electronic sports are using his likeness. He graduated from UCLA 10, 12 years ago, are using his likeness in a video game, and then he should be paid for it instead of the university. The athletic director of Texas said if that ever happens, and I think what he's really concerned about is that it would open the door to student payment. If this O'Bannon can get paid for that, then why can't athletes do that? And he said this would be the end of college sports as we know.
Well, that presupposes that what the courts are probably going to, what remedy they would put in place if we do that, and before discussing. I would say probably that's not going to be in college sports. And there's a lot of revenue sources we talk about that are some of the major recruiting factors that allow that to happen. No, with the vehicle money and the source. We're talking about the loss of the revenue for those video games.
And the opening of the door saying, well, if you can pay him for that, why can't you pay him for what?
Well, again, that's going to go with what the court has said. The court is making distinctions, which I think we've all talked about what happens after the student actually graduates. So I think they'll get that, and I think there's something fundamentally wrong with getting money from someone's name like this after they're no longer a student athlete. And if the court goes that way, that maybe that's going to take care of the future. So, but I would have to say, I think that's going to be the end all college sports and all. I don't think probably what we get together. You'll see that happens recently in some of the NCAA sequestration or send anything of the sort. But I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think the court will probably not tee up something that's going to lead to pay or play. I agree with everything that's been said here. It's an amateur model. Already there's some issues. One big question about allowed to buy somebody, for example, actual business and expenses. So these athletes are getting money other than successful colleges.
Let me get back to what I should be talking to you guys about, compliance. And thank you for going off on a little tangent with me this morning. Compliance here at Pepperdine. What do we do and how do we deal with the NC2A?
We do everything they ask us. Well, it starts with our president and what we intend to do. We're going to follow the rules as best we can. They're not always easy to follow. We make mistakes. And when we make mistakes, we're gonna report them and make changes and get better and live with the consequences. But it's since I've been in this, I've always approached compliance as you just have to do it. You not only have to follow the rules that you know, you have to make sure you know the rules. You have to make sure you find out what the rules are, and that's not always easy. We're given a book, and here are the rules, and they change all the time, and there's a whole library of interpretations, and you hope there's an interpretation that can help explain what that rule means, because they're not always written probably as clearly as they were intended to be written, and I think sometimes the biggest challenge is just actually figuring out what the rule is, and you kind of run the risk of violating something that you didn't even know you were supposed to be doing. But basically, you just got to start with, look, we're gonna have a program that's going to be successful within the rules, and we're not going to accept anything less than that. And I've always felt that any competitive success that came as a result of rules violations, well, that's not success, not in my mind. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. We're going to do it within the rules, and I could go on and on about the problems that I think exist in our rule system. I don't know if you want me to, but I just think you have to start with a culture. And if the culture of compliance doesn't exist within your program, you have to build it. You have to build it. And you have to build it with the kind of people that you hire. They have to understand from the very beginning, look, I don't care where you've been, I don't care how it's done anyplace else, because you get that a lot. Well, they do this over there. We've had coach after coach that comes back and says, well, I was out there and they were doing that. And I said, okay, well, fine, but I don't think that's right, and we're not going to do that. And well, that's gonna put us, in a recruiting disadvantage. I said, well, fine, because we're going to do it the right way, and somewhere, somehow, some way, it's going to catch up on them if they're doing it the wrong way. You have to start with that. I think it is. I think that's the feeling among most athletic departments. I hope I'm not naive in that. I think that's the way most of us approach it. There are probably some out there that approach it differently, and we hear about them. I think. But you just have to make up your mind what kind of program are you going to have? Are you going to have a program that skirts the rules? Or are you going to have a program that gets as close to the rules as they can and maybe crosses the line every now and then, and that's okay? Or are you going to say, no, we're going to do this, we're going to have competitive success within the rules, well within the rules, and when we do that, that's when I really enjoy
An SC, being a big market, big town, big television revenues, does compliance become more difficult?
It certainly is. I mean, there's 3 or 4 reasons why it's more problematic. I mean, if you're in Winnemucca, Nevada, you just don't have the scrutiny from the media, from the public, from everyone else in Los Angeles, California. So there's just a where are you location factor. There's the size of our program. We are who we are, and it's a very successful program, and I think anyone in this room would agree there are people who also want to knock the back out of our program. So whether there's more whistleblowers out there that want to try and make an issue, that's a fact. It's a bigger program. We have one of the larger programs in the country. You got more sports, you got more athletes, you got more things to look at. So all those are things. The last one is when you go under, I'll tell you this, and I don't know how many people here are institutions gone through a major instance violation. But once that happens, then there's another whole set of processes that go through what we do. So at SC, I mean, our view, and I agree with what Steve says, I mean, our view is we don't think every rule we have to follow is a good rule, but we have to follow every rule. How do we do that? We have to establish a culture of compliance. The new president, the new AD, and I, when we all got started, said that's what we're going to do. We are going to do it the right way. And you got to walk the walk. You can't just talk. Those of you who read the papers, we had a recent issue with one of our sports involving a coach. The coach is no longer with his guy. There's another guy. So we walk the walk. We don't just talk the talk. And that's going to build over the years. And it's, it's done probably before I got there. But it's hard. There's pressure to win. We've talked about in this market. With a lot of dollars flowing around. We've got a larger staff. That's a product of the infraction. The university commits resources. That's a part of compliance too. We're not going to commit the resources to the compliance office. It's not going to happen. We spend money on technology so we can monitor our phone calls to make sure they're not improperly made. All these things cost money. That's the only answer. When you're one of the top guys in the block in a sport program in a major market, the influences are hard. We've got athletes that, when I first came there, one of our athletes came over and said, I just got invited to go have dinner with Cossack, is one of the biggest personalities in LA. Zach's going to pick up the cap for that meal like that in years. And so, what student athlete or somewhere now is going to go have dinner with this major home stars. Jeez, okay? I mean, what about you don't worry about it? So we get a lot of problems that other places don't have in this.
But here's in terms of the conference, so the whole issue of compliance is more than one university issue. What problems does that face?
Well, as a conference, I mean, we have a responsibility as well to set the right tone for compliance. I agree with everything that's been said. It's really a culture of compliance that gets created on each university, and there must be a commitment of resources to it. You start with the standpoint, if you want to participate at this level, you can commit resources to a lot of things, but if you don't commit resources to compliance, then you're going to pay for it. You'll pay for it in a lot of ways. And so we have programming at the conference level, as every conference does. We send dispatch people to campus. They review and check to make sure there's shared responsibility and all of the systems that need to be in place are engaged and functioning systems. And if they're not, we try and fix them before we have a problem. And then, the challenges really come when you're forced with an issue that comes up, and you have to decide what to do with it. And we see so many times, including on the practice, for example, universities that see the red flag, but if the red flag is one they don't want to see, because we need that player to play this weekend against our in-state rival. If he doesn't play, we're going to be in trouble. So let's figure out a way to let this play out for a while. We try and talk about these things at the presidential level. It's more difficult now than it has because there's so many other issues more pressing sometimes than compliance. We talk about money, we talk about TV, we talk about conferences and realignment. We used to talk a little bit more about the need for compliance. presidential level. But ultimately, like you said, it starts at the top, and the president believes that compliance is essential. He'll take the steps, he or she will take the steps necessary to put the pieces in place and send the right signals. If not, then it's not at the top. Then you've got problems up and down the line. The tone and the culture really has to be set.
You know, if I can add just one thing, what it really is ethics. That's what compliance is. And you're either going to compete ethically or you're not. You basically have to convince everybody in the shop, student athletes, coaches, your boosters, that we're going to do this ethically. And that's a much bigger task than one to think about. I think the dean is going to go speak only at the Rutgers about ethics. So ethics is the basic fundamental issue because it's a self-reporting system. That's what the NCAA rule system is. You got to call the flag on yourself. One call, the sports. So, until we get that time when people aren't going to play the same complaint, they're all going to be ethical and they're not going to let that quarterback play just because they need to win the game. And we're a ways from that. But I think most of the institutions are striving to do that. They want to do it the right way. They need to build trust with the NCAA, so that we don't have investigations that take 5 years. If we're getting there, we can somehow mediate these things and get the right resolution. But yeah, that's what the key is.
And I'd add one other thing to it. It's just good business. It's good business because the costs associated with a major infractions case, the public relations costs, and the actual costs. There are boutique defense litigators in this space that make millions of dollars defending universities. And so the cost to universities of not doing it, just from a sheer business perspective, are extreme. It's just good business.
President Starr, I'm going to let you have the last word, and then I'm going to ask our panel some of the questions that we received from our audience.
On compliance, the term cultural compliance has been mentioned by my colleagues, and so the issue is how do you work to create that culture? I do think it starts, interestingly enough, at the Board of Trustees and Board of Regents level, and there are some good practices. There are best practices that have been identified, but it's very important for the board itself to be engaged. We've been talking and talking, walking and walk, and so the Board of Regents and many very well members may find themselves in the position as working boosters of having their own individual connections with student athletes, and so it's very important. This is the education pillar of a good compliance system, so it's that mechanism in place, so that we're educating everyone in the community, including the faculty, with respect to here are the rules, and they do. I associate myself completely with Steve Potts said the rules are complicated and they change and so forth, but still one has to do that. Also having, and just a tribute to my colleagues down at that end of the table, a very vigilant athletic director and then a director of compliance who are just all in for this culture of compliance. And that, of course, means what? They've got to be with the coaches. But so that, I guess I skipped over the president. So does the president. So let me briefly say what I do is I meet individually with our director of compliance monthly, and I have our general counsel present, not to cloak the conversation with privilege that might be an ancillary benefit. But it really is because our general counsel is very experienced, has been through from the GC's perspective, which brings that independent judgment to bear. I obviously meet with the AD, but I'm not meeting with the AD so much on compliance. That's just a component of my monthly meeting with the I see the AD all the time, and he's a member of the cabinet and so forth. So there are other mechanisms for interaction just specifically focused on compliance. And then the last thing I can say more is we have compliance moments. A lot of for-profit corporations, I see Professor Voss here, will have now compliance moments because almost every industry is heavily regulated, locally, state, federal, and so forth. So compliance moments, so let's bring the appropriate officer in of the company to just, what are we doing with respect to compliance, compliance, compliance? And so our Board of Regents 2 years ago decided that it wants to have a compliance moment in executive session. So the director of compliance, the AD is out of the room and typically in the room, but they can kick me out. I remember the board, but not living member. But I've always been into the compliance moments, and this is really starting again at the top, which will then filter its way down within part of the message from our director of compliance to the board is encourage the coaches, because the members of the board will have their own relationships, especially with the head coaches. Encourage them, be an encourager that compliance is so important. So we really love what Chad Jackson is your director of compliance doing. Just do everything that you can, because the stakes are so high to comply that it really is almost a doomsday scenario when you see, oh my word. So truly the final thing is it is self-reporting. This is like the IRS. It's self-reporting. You call, I love that metaphor, you call the flag on yourself. And having those mechanisms in place, including software that captures and harvests all the text, and then you've got to have the personnel to be reviewing it. That's now a big issue. Should it be that issue? There's some conversations going on with NCAA with respect to, or we're going to modify that process and so forth. But whatever the issue is the compliance infrastructure strong and supported through the
Now, in television, there's a term called the tease. The tease is something that makes you want to stay tuned after the commercial, so that you won't turn the channel while the commercial is going on. So the question that I would ask these gentlemen, if we had time and I was not going to ask the questions, would be, do you think the NC2A will be here in 5 years? So come around this afternoon for the second and last panel, and that's the first question I'm going to ask. So that's the tease for you guys. So you guys got off easy. All right, I shuffled up some of our cards so that people won't accuse me of editing, and I'm going to ask some questions that the audience has sent up to us. Here's the first one. Kevin Ware of Louisville broke his leg on a very public stage. The university sells jerseys with his number on it, and by acknowledging that, he got no proceeds. Oh, I hope this isn't a Pepperdine Law student. He got no. He didn't receive any proceeds from the sale of the jersey, and they were essentially admitting that it was his jersey. This could call into question, could this call into question eligibility issues? Can we begin to look at the spirit of the rules, or is that a slippery slope?
Well, I mean, the first thing I'm going to do as an athletic director is ask my compliance. My compliance partner here. I mean, I don't think there are any eligibility issues there. I think, the question now becomes, okay, the school's going to benefit from the sale of those jerseys. Should the student athlete benefit at all? And I mean, we sort of been through that. I don't think so. Not while they still as a competing student athlete. My opinion.
But the NCAA specifically allows us to put that mark as number 7 in jersey, so it's for the benefit of the non-conference jersey. So that's not a violation. If he's, when he's the student athlete that our university has a problem. After the fact, that's the discussion we're having. For his own that mark his jersey after he graduates, I think that would be that.
Would you object to sponsors paying players? And what if the funds were placed in a trust fund until graduation?
I would certainly object to sponsors paying players while they were student athletes. I think that's what we talked about earlier. That's problematic. It would be the way to get payment to players. The idea of a trust fund, I give some deferred compensation, I think is an interesting one. I've heard people talk about the possibility of creating some type of annuity program for student athletes that stay through their eligibility and graduate. I don't really feel strongly one way or another, but I really would like to see that conversation continue for the reasons I said earlier. I think these trend lines are just extreme, and I'd like to see more developed conversation about it.
And what if the money came from outside sponsors?
I think if the money is coming as a result of the student athleticism and the students' commercialism, I think where the money comes from, I think, is less an issue of whether or not the student athlete should be able to receive those things. Now, once a student graduates, I mean, if the student continues to pursue professional athletic endeavors and they're gone, obviously they can do whatever they want.
President Starr, do you feel the same way about that?
Yeah. I just don't like it. I think it's a
What about the idea, what about the deferred payments? The idea that you would set up a trust fund and perhaps outside forces would put that money in there and the student could get it after they graduate, student athlete could get it after they graduate.
Well, the principle that's guiding my thinking, and there may be a minority view, is that we want to promote as fully as we can, as honestly as we can, the culture of a student athlete who is indeed a student and who is not engaging in this wonderful activity in order to achieve direct, even deferred, payment.
Here's a question for you, President Starr. A student or a member of the audience asks, what sacrifices did Baylor make, and did that compromise its institutional control in significantly upgrading its athletic programs, leading to phenomenal success?
Wow, I like that last one.
I almost did it.
No, I think it's very important for, in terms of stewardship values, we're Christian institutions, we take that moral and biblical obligation, we certainly try to very seriously. So I will use, by way of example, the most expensive upgrade, which is the unfolding and ongoing, as we gather here, building of a $260 million stadium. Not one tuition dollar is going to that. So it is donor-driven. And then the longer-term financing, yes, we are going to the market and have gone to the market in terms of debt, but as long as the TV revenues flow in, we will be able to cover that. So I feel very comfortable with that. Moreover, even though we alluded to this before, I want to use the stadium as an example. Of the stadium, the on-campus football stadium, the current stadium is about 2 miles off campus. What the on-campus football stadium has done is called Baylor Nation together. It's crystallized their thinking with donors, including members of our Board of Regents, saying, I voted in favor of the stadium, but that's not what I feel called to do. So we have someone who is all into, very generous member of the Board of Regents, all into STEM. So what are we doing in science, technology, engineering, mathematics? And so he has been moving funds that, I don't know if those have been forthcoming, into STEM. And I want to close with this. I was a skeptic and was raising a lot of questions, call me the devil's advocate with respect to the decision to build the on-campus stadium. And much wiser, certainly more experienced, but also wiser heads than yours truly said, Ken, just watch. You will see, as I remembered what Alan Merton said, you will see that when that process begins, folks will be coming forward and saying, I'm not called to support the stadium, but I am called to support this project or this excellence fund, and it has happened. It has happened. And so I've been very pleasantly, Roger, surprised by how powerfully constructive this one project has been in terms of people saying, I was just with a wonderful alumna who hasn't been on campus for 8 years. She comes back and says, you know, everything is going on, this is so good. And so here's $2.5 million for a scholarship fund. Nothing is for athletics, but here's for a scholarship fund. And I can tell story after story about that. It creates this energy, a culture of generosity, and gives really a rallying cry to the entire community. So I have a feeling that that is not unique to Baylor.
Dave, here's a question to you. What should a university do to address findings and sanctions that its revenue sports lacks institutional control? Let me read that to you again. You said,
That's not a good question.
Yeah, no. Let me read it to you in English. Mr. Roberts, what should a university do to address findings and sanctions that its revenue sports lack institutional control? I didn't make that one up.
No, I didn't make that one up. Well, assuming we agree with the findings, which you may or may not agree with, but obviously, I guess the question is, what do you do to have institutional control? And what you do to have institutional control, we control is what's shared responsibility. It goes to the president's office to make sure that the individual on the board is hiring, a good athletic director, a good compliance director, and they're going to put a compliance program in place that's going to educate all the appropriate constituents the university has about the rules, and that's the student athletes, the coaches, the administrators, the boosters, the alumni, and fans, to the extent you care about what the rules are. And then they're going to put in place a system of monitoring compliance of those rules. For example, there's a new piece of legislation that's enjoyed about head coach responsibility. We have set a whole protocol now for our head coaches to do things to make sure that they're going to be able to provide a presumption that they don't have an atmosphere of compliance, or they have not monitored their resolution. So, what an institution has to do is they have to have the right people, obviously, they have to have ethical people, they have to have a plan in place that's going to educate all the appropriate people, and then they have to monitor what goes on, and be able to, in a time say, the university is going to do everything possible, to stop this from happening. Now, is that going to preclude all violations? No, it won't. I'm hopeful someday we'll get a safe harbor concept, and the university can say that it has done everything possible to stop that. And if you had a Maverick or a Rogue, whoever it was, student athlete or a coach or a booster, that person should be subject to a penalty or a problem that the university can show. They acted appropriately, shouldn't suffer some of the sanctions that institutions have. So I think that we were created probably 5 years ago, and now we're serving that penance. I think that probably affects student athletes who come here now. It's hard with it now, but in terms of the institutional control that the program in place, and that as well.
Steve, I think we've touched on this, but I want to ask the question. If the model of a university is that its growth in education, what is the rationale of allowing one and done? And I guess the question I'm asking you is, would we think of one and done here?
Yeah, we would. I can speak for Marty Wilson, our head basketball coach, and say, yeah, we'd like to try that. Yeah, there are problems with it. It's not a good model. Unfortunately, and as has been mentioned here before, we have no control over it whatsoever. We're at the mercy of the professional leagues. I love the baseball rule. Again, I wish we could go to the rule where, yeah, everybody completes their eligibility before they're allowed to participate as a professional athlete. Yeah, I love that. It'd be great for the kids. But that's not going to happen. And I don't understand why we have a rule for baseball that's different than we have a rule for football, than the rule for basketball. And then you can start talking about there are professional tennis players that are 14, 15 years old, and what does that do for them? Or men's and women's golf. And I don't like the one and done. In my opinion, it doesn't benefit anybody. I don't think. Part of the problem is, that there's really no motivation for that young man, or I guess young woman, to be a student. And that's, again, that gets back to the very core foundation of where we started with this. We're here to teach and educate these young men and women, and if we know that this particular student athlete is really only going to be a student for one semester, then yeah, there's something wrong with that. But again, I think about who are we to say that a young man can't go out and make a living? What right do we have to tell anybody? It doesn't happen in other areas. If there's some computer genius on this campus that decided he wanted to try college for 1 year or 1 semester, and he developed a software program that was going to make him millions of dollars, we would applaud. We think nothing about that young man or woman, going out and doing what they're gifted to do. So I think we have the right to say no.
I just add two things to that. I agree. Some programs that we take a look at Kentucky a year ago, I think had one of them. You got to be real careful because there's a thing called APR, and as you said, if these kids don't go to class, you're going to start the program is going to get hit, potentially lose scholarships in the future. The other thing is you got to be careful because there are probably a lot of hangers-on on that type of individual that comes in not ready to take him out, and so you've got a whole set of benefits issues, aging issues, and others. So it's doable, but boy, you better have everybody intent to pick up the academic issues and the prism and the eligibility issues, because those players are going to probably help you for 1 year if they're eligible, but the baggage they bring along with them sometimes get lost.
Yeah, again, we had a coach in our conference who went on to play coach in Kentucky who thought the one and done was the way, and he had a very good player from Chicago who was handed off basically to him with the understanding that he would let him start and play the entire season, and then he would be handed back at the end of the season. And that was the expectation. And the player is an NBA MVP, but he took his team right up to the edge of the finals of the championship on his shoulders. But he wasn't there to get an education. He was there to get on a basketball team. And so there's some fundamental pieces about that. Obviously, the broader institutional community rallied around that team, and they had a great run, and brought all kinds of great attention and positive notoriety to the university, to the program. But at the end of the day, I think you got to go back and ask yourself, is that the right model?
President Starr, isn't, and I understand all of you have the same issue, but isn't the accepting of one and done, which is not that I want to make sure everybody understands this is a collective bargaining agreement between the professionals and not the universities. This is made up as the players, as to how many players, how many years they actually have to play before they're eligible to go to the pros. And different leagues have different standards. Baseball is you either go in right away or you can't go until you graduate.
No, junior year.
Junior year. Football is 3 years. Basketball, we have the one and done. So, President Starr, why accepting one and done? Isn't that the professionalization of college athletics?
Well, it is a compromise, there's no question. Then again, we are the victims. We have no say other than to encourage a different kind of model. And we certainly encourage our student athletes, this is really men's basketball, to remain. And we've enjoyed some modest success as people going after the freshman year. But I'll tell you, the head coach, men's basketball coach at Kentucky is a very articulate defender of one and done. I've heard him, and he was, this is now a year ago when Kentucky won the national championship, but when he was receiving an award for his remarkable performance, he noted that all four, so this goes, Dave, to your point, all four of those one and done did in fact finish their freshman year, and they had a cumulative GPA of 3 point something. So he was very proud of that, and justly so. But he also made a very interesting point that so many of these young men come from truly deprived backgrounds. And I know some of these stories personally. And you have parents who are honestly eager for their son at the age of 19 to go make so they can live in a house. So I think we need to see that side of the story as well. But if I had my way, I would say I would become a professional athlete once I've completed my student eligibility. A great example from baseball, David Murphy of Baylor Bear completed his 3 years at Baylor, and then was drafted by the Texas Rangers, and he's very successful and making a lot of money. And Dave comes back, he lives in Dallas, comes back to campus, a couple of times a year, and he wants to finish his degree, but it's impossible. I mean, some online possibility, but it's impossible for him to work in that full academic year, given the demands for just the season for professional baseball. I think that's really unfortunate.
You mentioned head coach. Here's a question that we have. Given the character building and community enhancing functions of athletics discussed this morning, what is the role of a head coach? This goes on to say studies are showing that a higher turnover rate for head coaches is correlated with lower academic performance by athletes, and the turnover rate is rising. Is there an unhealthy mercenary mindset in coaching? And if so, how does it affect programs and players?
Yes. I think there's no stronger voice for a student athlete than the head coach. You have to have head coaches that fit your philosophy, that fit the institution, that fit the mission of your institution. And I think as an athletic director, the most important thing I do is hire people. And making sure we get the right people who share, again, our philosophy and our mission, and making sure that they do what, that everything they do is in concert with that mission. And then make sure that they understand that in recruiting, we're going to find kids that understand that what it's going to take to be successful here academically, what it's going to take to be successful here within our community, and hopefully what it's going to take to be successful as they develop their own athletic skill. And that's hard. That's not easy. But it has to start with a head coach. Everything starts with a head coach in terms of your relationship with student athletes. You've got to have that head coach that has bought into compliance. You have to have that head coach that, again, understands the mission of the institution and the philosophy. You have to have a head coach that has a good relationship with your marketing department. A head coach that understands we have a limited budget that he or she has to stay within. A head coach that has a great relationship with our strength and conditioning staff, with our training staff. A head coach that hopefully understands and accepts their role in promoting academics for their student athletes. Nobody has the ear of a student athlete like a head coach. And again, the most important thing I think that I do is hire the right people to fit.
Dave, over there.
I agree with everything that's said. I mean, obviously, somebody mentioned earlier that we're on the country, and we've got some head coaches that are probably a heck of a lot more than university presidents and the whole dollar side of athletics. Lose us over sometimes what's going on. But head coach integrity, I think that we're just moved to ask head coaches to, in essence, be responsible for everything that happens in their program is the right way to do it. If I want something to really happen on one of our teams, the person I need to get to be the leader of that charge is a head coach. Because our student athletes are students and they go to class, but the next thing they want to make sure is they're on the competition field. You're on the competition field, they have to be on the practice field, and the coach needs to understand that they got to do it right, or he's not a way that they can't practice or they can't play. He said that. It's a pressure because he's being paid those big dollars in their sports to win games, and there's a big pressure when our quarterback does something wrong, or isn't turning in, signing the car log, or he won't do what he's supposed to do. So I think integrity is the most important position in the athletic department, other than the AD, who hires him. And that's why I see such movement. That's why I see big dollars being paid for coaches that ADs believe they can win. Hopefully we'll do it the right way. Won't get their programs in trouble. And hopefully we'll stay there a while, because this transitory nature does need less pressure.
Because we do see head coaches, or at least we see in the paper, head coaches making great salaries. What kind of an impact does that have on student athletes? And the fact that coaches leave and go for a better job, and maybe the message is, if they're going for the money, why shouldn't I go for it?
That's a great question. I agree with what's been said over here. I mean, how the head coach, the perspective of the head coach relative to his job or her job at a university is critical. And if they view themselves as educators, that takes them in one direction. coaches that takes them in another direction. And one of the practices we see is coaches in football take a job at the end of the football season, but before the ball game. And they tell the team, they look at the team, they say, you know what, I'm out of here. Good luck in your bowl game. And they're gone. And so, you know, those kinds of messages, we try and encourage our coaches not to do that because it sends all the wrong messages. You started the team, you finished the season with them. But it's indicative of kind of some of the challenges we have because they're ready to move on to their next, generally more lucrative assignment. And they leave the messaging behind.
President Starr, the role of the head coach, the problem of head coaches leaving for...
I thought you were going to ask me about their salaries exceeding the presidents.
Maybe you forgot that I remember you hired.
I think it's vitally important to encourage this culture of stability. I'll use the example of our head football coach who has been recruited after each of the last 2 seasons where the Bears enjoyed some success by schools in the SEC and money that we cannot match. We can't go there. But we boost Coach Riles' compensation. But Art Riles is the kind of person who believes in building a program. And you'll hear some of the most successful coaches, head coaches, talk about, I'm building a program. It's not the cult of the personality. I'm the leader of a program. Well, you can't build a program if you're hopping around every few years. And I think that is the rule, that there are exceptions, but the rule is the head coaches really do care about the program, about the student athletes. And so I would say that what we want the head coach to be is a person, obviously, of ability and excellence in the sport, but a person who is really setting by his or her actions a great example of this is a fine person who really cares about the student athletes, who cares about their well-being, and who's going to be, Barnabas from the New Testament, a great encourager. He will be obviously inspirational. I love listening to head coaches and inspire. I mean, it's really fun to listen to them. They're great inspirers. I mean, they'll sell you anything. You know, I'll go through that brick wall. I'll go through the brick wall. I'll buy the brick wall and then I'll run through the brick wall. But you want them to be these examples of character. That means that they ain't going after the last dollar.
Okay, we have a few minutes left, and I wanted to ask you a question, President Starr, about what happened. You left here and to take over the presidency of Baylor and ran right into a conference realignment.
A brick wall?
A brick wall. You went through and look at Baylor today. What conference realignment is the story of our time. It's happening everywhere. What is it? It's a direct result of money. Explain what effect did that conference realignment issue have? And it's still around Texas A&M. It's now left. We went with you, and now it's left. And it's money and it's income. This was conference realignment just because of money.
These are very individual decisions for the institutions. Sometimes it is a cultural sense of we just don't fit in this conference as well as we would fit elsewhere. So let me say, judge not that should be not judged. I'll just speak much more generically. The destabilizing effect, I believe, is quite unfortunate for college athletics because part of the glory of college athletics are these great rivalries, many of which in college athletics are a century plus old. And so to see the elimination of those rivalries, most famously my native state, in which I've returned to, Texas and Texas A&M, and the University of Texas said, we're not going to play you. And our dear coach, Lady Bears, Tim Mulkey, said when Gary Blair, the very fine coach of Texas A&M women's basketball team, well, I'd still like to be playing with the Baylor Bears. We're only 80 miles away, College Station and so forth. And Tim Mulkey said, when you divorce someone, you don't call them up and ask, can I come over and sleep with you? So, and that's just not good. Because, I mean, there are really hard feelings about that, so we wish everyone well when they make a decision to go to the conference. But I think it's just highly disruptive of the stability and the traditions that are part of the glory of college athletics.
What does it say? I mean, what message does it send? conference realignment, regional rivalries scrapped. Fans forgotten who love these regional rivalries. Universities going to different parts of the country that have nothing to do with their location. What message does that send?
Well, it sends a lot of different messages. One message it sends, it's probably a positive message, and that's that, these are aspirational universities that want to be as good as they possibly can be, and they want to be fully developed and realize their full potential. And so that's a message that is generally a good thing. People want to get better jobs, they want to improve professionally and develop. If they leave one job for another job, you usually say, you did great here, go do great in your next assignment. And so there's a positive element to it, but it's mostly destructive, I think, in the context of the fabric of higher education. These universities relate to each other on so many different levels. And athletics is one of those levels, but when you go through the types of very challenging and emotional circumstances, there's the team of the Big 12, and I think President Starr gave great leadership at a time when it was needed, but there was a point in time when it looked like that great conference and that great structure was actually going to implode altogether. And that idea of those universities, the stakes at play, if that were to occur, are so great that it's painful, it's emotional. You try not to let it be, but you can't. Once you tear the fabric and you tear it over and over again, it's just very difficult to put it back together.
Dave, isn't it, we've gone from the Pac-12, was it 8 to the 10 to 12? We don't break up, we have here on the West Coast. So our rivalries are still intact. We create new ones, but doesn't it send a bad message to our fans if, in fact, USC was to leave and join another conference, where maybe they would have a bigger payday because there'd be more well-known teams to play them? But it would be like selling the fans out.
Well, I think that's probably right. I think that's what you're talking about. Breaking these relationships, it's going to do damage in the conference. I don't think I've ever heard anybody, USC leaving the Pacific Conference. It's always been a linchpin there. So, but I agree with you that the realignment has some real problems. There's a larger issue too about the haves and the have-nots. And there was one 6 months a year ago, I think there were some of the big schools that wasn't feeling this issue of whether or not they can do things that their budget can allow, or lesser schools have resources to want that happen. Hopefully the reform movements that we're having now, some of the new rules will help solve some of those problems. And so maybe some of those things will go away. Dollar sign is a big drop, but I don't think that's going anywhere.
And Steve, I'm going to give you the final word. Conference realignment, does it affect Pepperdine or are we in?
Well, it certainly did affect us, I think, in a positive way. We benefited, obviously, again, we're not a football conference. The West Coast Conference, we had 8 schools that have been together for 30 to 40 years at least, and good, solid schools, like missions and private schools. And we were affected when BYU decided they needed to look. They wanted to protect their football media rights. They invested $100 million in their own BYU network, and they wanted to control that. And that makes a lot of sense when you make that kind of investment, and you don't want somebody telling you, you can't broadcast that football game like you want to worldwide. And so they wanted control of those, and they needed to. The Mountain West wasn't going to give that to them, and so they ended up at our conference. And it's been a great thing for our conference to be associated with such a fine institution, and we've benefited from that. And they control their football and their schedule, so we were affected by it. And then being a 9-school conference, that doesn't really work well with scheduling, and so it did affect us. Now we've added a 10th school that will begin this fall in the University of the Pacific. Again, geographically fits, and so it did affect us. And the other thing it's done, you become come as a conference, whether you're playing football or not, you're paying attention to that every single day. I know that's become prevalent in our conference. We're monitoring the landscape. I've seen more reports about, these are all the private schools west of the Mississippi that may or may not fit for this reason or that reason, and we've got data about traveling and mileage. The one thing that I'll say about, conference realignment, and I think that these gentlemen will agree, it's all about football and the media money that comes with football. I think the sad thing is going to be, or it's good, the challenging thing is going to be, well, our women's volleyball team now has to compete in that conference. Our tennis teams now have to compete in that conference. Our baseball teams now have to compete in that conference. It's not just football. Whereas it may be a good fit for football, I'm not sure it's a good fit for the other teams down the line.
Well, that's about it for this morning. I can't think of another panel that I've been associated with that has been as candid in answering the questions that you gentlemen have, and some I hope not too tough questions. I really appreciate all of you being here this morning, and I appreciate all of you being here this morning. Thank you very much.